Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to take a look at the question of whether or not Moon Knight works better in 2024 or 2025. Now, the Marvel Cinematic Universe official timeline book won't be out for another month. However, in an earlier video, I covered the fact that Amazon.com has released several pages, including the index. And if you look really closely at the index, you can pretty much build out the entire timeline. And it shows that Moon Knight will be placed in 2025. But I know that several timelines do have it in 2024. So which year works better? Well, let's dive right in and see what we can find out. So I like to remind that there is a contest running on the channel throughout the month of September. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment. The winner will be announced in early October and can choose between one of the books above. Best of luck. Okay, so the earlier video goes into great detail on everything the index tells us, but we're just going to focus on the Moon Knight portion. Notice that Arthur Harrow appears on pages 296 to 301. And then if you look down at the index, that places it sometime in the earlier half of 2025. We know it's after Jennifer Walters is training with Bruce on pages 294 to 295 from the Flashbacks in the She-Hulk show. And we know it's before Jane Foster takes her April 30th blood test on page 301. And it's before Wakanda Forever, which is in May. Okay, so that kind of puts us in a range of somewhere between February and April, but we're going to see that you can really nail that down to the specific month. But most importantly, the index tells us it's in 2025 and the earlier portion of 2025. All right, so I'm going to go through some of the flashbacks first because it just kind of helps us put the whole show in perspective. And of course, I need to do a shout out to the best wiki on the planet, the Marvel Cinematic Universe wiki, because it is so helpful for doing this type of research. All right, so very nice date given to us in the show, which is Mark's birthday, March of 1987. So that's important. Keep that in mind. It was on his passport. That's going to help us place these earlier flashbacks. Speaking of, we have Mark Spector's brother Randall, who tragically drowns. In this flashback, we're placing it in late summer of 1996. We'll get to why it's 1996 in a minute, but it's late summer because they're having a barbecue. So great. So then after they go to the cave and Randall drowns, of course they have a Shiva, which is just a few days later, also in September of 1996. So why 1996? Well, because the very next birthday Mark has after his brother's death is his 10th birthday. We know he was born in March of 1987, so this is March of 1997. And of course, his mother refuses to come down and attend his birthday party because she blames poor little Mark for Randall's death. Then we jump to his 12th birthday, so March of 1999. And once again, Mark is harassed by his mother. And I've had people say I should add her as a villain on the list of villains in the MCU. And they might be right. She is pretty wicked, pretty wicked. Well, anyway, she follows him upstairs. She punishes him so severely that this is when the Stephen Grant persona forms. So March of 1999. All right. Then we jump to February of 2015. And we'll see why in just a second. But this is when Mark Spector is basically saved by Khonshu and first becomes Moon Knight. So why February 2015? Well, it's 2015 because Layla says it's been 10 years since she was in Egypt. And of course, that was this scene. And we know that the main show is happening in 2025. So that would put us in 2015. And then it's a few months before because we see also that this is the same time when Mark avoids his mother's Shiva and the Stephen persona finally takes completely over him. He's now Stephen. And during the flashbacks, he discusses this is it, Mom's death and Shiva 2 months ago. So it was literally just 2 months before the show that he became Stephen Grant. And that makes sense because Layla said, I've been texting you and calling you for months. So all kind of fits together. This is February of 2025 for this final flashback. Then the main show, why is it being placed in April of 2025? Well, again, it has to be before Jane's blood test on April 30th, but that's fine because notice this date they provide us on the exhibit, April 22nd to July 29th. And this exhibit is important because Stephen marches right in the office and says, hey, it's wrong. You got this thing wrong because it's got 7 gods here and the Ennead has 9. So The bottom line is, Stephen, who is brilliant in this type of thing, there's no way he'd come in and make this report late in the exhibit. So we're going to see why that's really, really important to placing this. It's early in the exhibit's time frame. So an April timeframe makes sense, maybe even mid-April or at the latest closer to the opening of the exhibit on April 22nd. Okay, great. Also, I think it's helpful that he tells us there aren't 7 gods, but 9, because it's very interesting how when they have this big meeting to decide whether or not Arthur Harrow and Amit are in trouble, not everyone attends. Remember, there were supposed to be 9, but that's not 9. So I think it's very convenient and very smart that this is happening in May of 2025, because that's the same time as we learned in the Thor video that I did the other day. That's when Gorr's attacks are happening. Maybe, just maybe, it impacted why some of the council didn't show up, because there was a rumored crossover or tie-in between Thor Love and Thunder and Moon Knight that they ended up ditching. But still, I think this might have been where it could have happened. So I like the fact that Moon Knight and Thor Love and Thunder are kind of happening simultaneously. Because remember, Gorr makes his vow, all gods will die. So I'm not saying Gorr actually killed some of those gods, although he could have. Some of them might be hiding. So it's just kind of interesting to think what could have been and what maybe is being implied. So very cool. Okay, what else do we know? Well, we know it's post-Endgame because there's the GRC Easter egg. That didn't tell us much, but it does at least tell us it's post-Endgame. We also know that a few of the scenes show spring flowers in bloom. So once again, that April timeframe works good, and it just makes sense that he would go in and report that the number of gods are wrong, early in April. So this is all fitting really well. So where does this whole 2024 thing even come into play? I mean, you could argue this is perfect. April of 2025, close the door, be done. Okay. Because there are theories that the original timeline was based on the phases of the moon. Because notice on the left, each time an episode would end, we kept seeing the moon slowly becoming closer and closer to becoming a full moon. And Mohammed Diab, the director, even seemed kind of bummed that it didn't seem like Marvel was going to go with what he originally planned. He says, the Marvel world is so complex, we had a date, we had a year, but I'm not going to say just because it doesn't matter anymore. So I appreciate him being a team player, because he could be like, Marvel's stupid. They didn't go with my idea. I worked so hard on this. But people came up with this theory that this date that he doesn't want to discuss was based on the phases of the moon. And the wiki kind of goes into this. The wiki discusses that at the end of the goldfish problem, a waxing crescent moon is shown on the day after what is said to be Sunday, placing the waxing crescent on Monday. Keep that in mind. Waxing crescent on Monday. This aligns with the lunar phase on Monday, April 28th of 2025. Well, that's great. That seems to work, right? Because we said April 2025. As this would place the episode early in the exhibit and only a few days prior to a waxing crescent, technically not aligning exactly, but still being very close. Working backward, this was placed the first scene featuring the exhibit on Thursday, April 24th, the earliest date it can possibly occur on. So that seems to work, right? It then even adds a little more and says in the friendly type, another episode, the sun is shown to have not yet risen in Cairo at 6 a.m., suggesting the series should ideally be set earlier in the year. Again, supporting the idea that this is earlier in the exhibit rather than later. So all this sounds good, right? The phases of the moon match, right? Well, as the wiki says, not exactly. A perfect match, like perfect, is in June of 2024. So if you notice, waxing crescent on Monday, remember that's why I said that they showed a waxing crescent on Monday. Well, this is perfect. So that's why people have said, well, it has to be June of 2024. That's when Mohammed Diab was planning on it. Well, even Diab said, hey, it doesn't matter anymore. It just doesn't matter. But also, June doesn't work. Why would Stephen go in and complain about the number of gods in the exhibit in June? He wouldn't. That's the answer. So instead, if you look at April 2025, like the wiki said, it's almost a waxing crescent, almost on that Monday. It's so close, but it's not perfect. So that's why people who adhere to the moon theory are still placing it in June of 2024. But it's obvious to me now that the Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline book is going to place it in 2025, and that it just fits really well in April. So there's going to be people, I guarantee, to the end of time, they're going to hold on to June of 2024, and that's fine. You know, if people don't want to agree with the timeline book, that's okay. If they want to hold out, you know, that Diab had it right, that's fine. But I think it's clear that at least April of 2025 narratively makes sense and is really close to working from the phases of the moon. So there you go. That's why April of 2025 works better than June of 2024, and why the timeline book has placed it in 2025. So once again, this timeline is out on my Google Drive. I will leave a pinned comment in case you want to go pull it down. But this is phases 1 and a little bit of 2, and the rest of and all of 3 rather, and then phase 4. And of course, we were discussing Moon Knight, which is down there in the lower left-hand corner, April to May of 2025. Notice how it's running simultaneously with what's going on in Thor: Love and Thunder, which is really cool. And there it is right before Wakanda Forever, and then She-Hulk, with that flashback in She-Hulk being actually before. So there you go. That's how it fits. And here's a little bit of phase 5. And don't forget, we have the September contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. And lastly, I always like to give the Discord server invitation. Here we are talking about the timelines, and in this case, Deadpool and X-Men timelines. We'd love to have you join. So there will be a pinned comment with an invite, and come out and be part of the conversation. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.